In this video, I'm taking a look at the Nikon AF-S Nikkor 70-200mm f4G ED-VR, Nikon's latest enthusiast-level telephoto zoom lens with a constant aperture. Before its release, Nikon had long offered both professional 70-200mm and 80-200mm f2.8 lenses, as well as prosumer-grade fixed f4 70-210mm and consumer-grade variable-aperture telephoto zooms. With this lens, they aim to provide a more budget-friendly alternative to their latest high-end AF-S 70-200mm f2.8G VR. To achieve this, Nikon incorporated their latest advancements in coating technology, autofocus AF, vibration reduction, and optical designs to create this lens by the end of 2012. Let's take a closer look. I tested this lens on a 46-megapixel Nikon Z7 Mark II. Sample images were taken with Nikon ZF, Nikon Z6, Nikon D600, and Nikon D70-200. You can find this review as a written blog post on our blog site, where you'll find detailed test charts on sharpness and other characteristics. Most of the sample images in high resolution are available on a separate site. I leave links to the blog post and the sample images in the description below. I bought this lens with my own money. No sponsorship, no freebies, just my honest thoughts, as always. Handling and build quality. The AF-S Nikkor 70-200mm f4 ED-VR is, as the name suggests, an autofocus lens with image stabilization rated up to 5 stops. The body is made of hard plastic with rubberized focus and zoom rings and a metal mount. While the lens doesn't feel cheap at all, it doesn't quite have the same refined build as some of the newer Z-series lenses. In the hand, it feels surprisingly light, especially considering its length and the fact that it houses 20 lens elements. One thing that stood out to me was the overall length of the lens compared to its diameter. It looks quite long. Add the large lens hood, and it gets even longer. If you're using it on a Z-series mirrorless camera with the FTZ adapter, the total length increases farther. The focusing ring, which in the old days was always positioned nearest to the front element, is wide and supports full-time manual focus override. This means you can fine-tune the focus even when autofocus is active. The zoom ring, located closest to the camera, is also quite wide and marked with focal lengths at 70, 85, 105, 135, and 200mm, with the numbers painted directly onto the ring. The lens and manufacturer's names are embossed and finished with gold paint. You will also find additional marking on the barrel, including Nikon SWM VREDEF 57mm diameter nanocrystal coat made in Thailand, along with the serial number. Between the focus and zoom rings, there is a distance scale window that shows focus distance in both meters and feet. Just below that, you'll find several switches. An AMM switch for autofocus mode, a focus limiter that restricts AF to 3 meters to infinity, which helps speed up things, a VR on-off switch, and a stabilization mode switch with normal and active settings. Normal is the default for handheld shooting, while active is meant to handle more aggressive, high-frequency motion like shooting from a moving vehicle. All the switch labels are printed on the barrel. Nikon claims up to 5 stops of stabilization with this lens's VR system. In practice, I can definitely see that it helps with getting sharper handheld shots at slower shutter speeds. Whether it's giving me the full 5 stops, or more like 4, is hard to say for sure, but the improvement is noticeable. The autofocus uses Nikon's silent wave motor technology, and the minimum focusing distance is 1 meter. AF performance is reasonably fast and accurate, even for sports. In the most demanding situations, though, it won't work miracles. For example, if a dog is running straight at you at full speed from close range, it won't completely fail, but you will get a mix of hits and misses. In other sports scenarios, it performed more than satisfactory. The 1 meter minimum focusing distance gives you a maximum magnification of 0.274 times at 200mm focal length. The lens features internal focusing and zooming, so it doesn't extend or rotate when you change focus or zoom. Handy if you're using filters. While it's not as heavy sealed as some of the larger pro-grade f2.8 lenses, Nikon designed this lens with environmental sealing at critical points, including the mount. In the box, along with the usual plastic front and rear caps, you get a substantial lens hood and a soft velvet-like closed pouch. Optical features. Let's start with sharpness. To assess it, we examine 3 areas: sharpness near the infinity mark, the portrait distance, and in close-up shots. For the infinity sharpness test, we look at 3 areas of the image: center, midframe, and corner. At 70mm, at f4, center sharpness is already excellent, with very good results in the midframe and good sharpness in the corners. Stopping down to f5.6 brings the corners up to very good, and by f8 the midframe also reaches excellent sharpness. At f11 and f16, sharpness stays very good across the frame. Diffraction starts to have small effect at f16, gets more noticeable at f22, and becomes most apparent at f32. The sharpest center is at f5.6, while the best overall sharpness across the frame is at f8. At 130mm, at f4 and f5.6, center sharpness is excellent, and corners are very good. By f8, sharpness across the entire frame becomes excellent. From f11 to f16, sharpness dips slightly to very good, and diffraction starts to kick in at f22 and beyond. Peak center sharpness is at f4, while the best across the frame sharpness is again at f8. At 200mm, from f4 to f8, the center remains excellent, and both the midframe and corners stay consistently very good throughout. Peak sharpness, both in the center and across the frame, is reached at f8. Overall, the sharpness is strongest around 135mm and weakest at 200mm, but even then, performance stays very good to excellent at all focal lengths and apertures. No major weak spots, just solid optical performance across the board. Sharpness at portrait distance. Let's look at the points of interest for portraits at portrait distance: the center, the inner circle, and the outer circle. Sharpness is excellent at all focal lengths and across all tested points starting from f4. At 200mm, images appear less sharp compared to other focal lengths, particularly in the outer circle area. Stopping down by 1 stop results in the most noticeable improvement in sharpness there. Close-up sharpness. At close-up distances, sharpness is excellent at both 70mm and 135mm, even wide open at f4. However, at 200mm, images appear a bit softer, with a slight haze over the frame. Stopping down to f5.6 significantly improves sharpness at 200mm. From f5.6 to f11, sharpness stays consistent across the frame. At f16, there is a slight drop, but it's still excellent. Diffraction starts to impact sharpness at f22 and f32, but even then it remains good. Lens distortion. Camera distortion control was off during the tests. The Nikon AF-S 70-200mm f4G shows visible barrel distortion at the wide end, 70mm, which requires a +7 correction in Lightroom and Photoshop. Distortion between 85mm to 105mm are very small and can be ignored. The distortion becomes more visible from 135mm. It can be clearly visible as a pincushion distortion at the tele end, 200mm, which requires -7 to correct in Lightroom and Photoshop. All in all, it's a decent performance. Vignetting. At 70mm, vignetting is well controlled. Even at f4, the light fall-off is only noticeable in situations with uniform lighting, like snowy or overcast scenes with lots of sky. From f5.6 onward, vignetting becomes barely noticeable. At 135mm, vignetting is more pronounced. At f4, it's relatively strong, but it reduces to a moderate to low level starting at f5.6. At 200mm, vignetting falls somewhere between the 70mm and 135mm performance. At f4, there is noticeable light fall-off, though not as much as at 135mm f4. By f5.6, it's more manageable, and from f8 onward, it's nearly gone. For these tests, the Nikon Z camera's vignette control was set to normal. Focus shift and aberrations. The Nikon AF-S Nikkor 70-200mm f4G experiences some spherical aberrations at its longest focal length, 200mm. This affects sharpness, making it less sharp at 200mm compared to other focal lengths, particularly at f4. In these shots, you will notice slight focus shift at 200mm, which is a common sign of spherical aberrations. Additionally, the sharpness at f4 looks a bit hazy, but improves significantly when you stop down just one click, another clear sign of spherical aberration. There is a modest amount of longitudinal chromatic aberration. It's very small though and will not be noticed in most cases. Lateral chromatic aberration is very well corrected, as you can see in these 100% cropped images from image corners. Flare resistance. Zoom lenses are generally more prone to flare and glare, especially those with complex optical designs that have a lot of glass-to-air surfaces, like this one. Nikon used its top-tier coating technology on this lens, similar to what's found on its professional models, and it does help. In certain conditions, even with the sun in the frame, flare is well controlled, and contrast stays strong. That said, the lens still has 28 internal glass-to-air surfaces, which limits how effective the coatings can be. In more challenging lighting situations, like shooting directly into a bright light source at certain angles or with the sun just outside the frame, you may still see noticeable flares and wailing glare. Coma. There is a very small, negligible amount of coma at wider focal lengths, which does not affect image quality. Overall, coma correction is quite good. Sun stars. Sun stars aren't a standout feature of this lens. Telephoto lenses, in general, don't create strong sun stars, and this one, with its 9 rounded aperture blades, is no exception. Like many other telephoto zooms, its performance when it comes to sun stars is relatively weak. Focus breathing. The Nikon AF-S 70-200 f4 GVR suffers from focus breathing, but again it's not worse than other telephoto zoom lenses. Bokeh. Let's first take a look at the bokeh highlights. Overall, the bokeh is clean and evenly lit, with no harsh edges or onion rings. However, you might notice a bit of halo around the edges, especially away from the center, along with some noticeable optical vignetting. An interesting thing to note is that, except for 200mm, the aperture is slightly closed even at f4, wide open. This is likely to keep the aperture consistent throughout the zoom range. Now let's take a closer look at the background blur at different distances. A lot of people assume that a lens with a 4 maximum aperture can't produce smooth, creamy bokeh. Well, this lens is here to prove them wrong. Conclusion and sample images. First, the things I like: the sharpness, distortion control, vignetting, chromatic aberrations, bokeh, build quality, handling. Things that are not bad but are not good either: flare resistance, focus breathing, autofocus performance. Things with room for improvement: sun stars, spherical aberration at 200mm focal length. This lens is a lightweight telephoto zoom with solid performance, and there is a lot to love about it, as you see in the like-dislike table. There are only a few minor drawbacks, and most of them aren't unique to this lens. This lens delivers excellent sharpness from center to corner, beautiful color rendition, fast autofocus, and highly effective vibration reduction. In some areas, it even outperforms the high-end Nikon 70-200mm f2.8 GVR. Thanks to its much shorter minimum focus distance, it's actually the better choice for photographing small subjects up close. It's also very usable on APS-C cameras, giving an equivalent focal length of about 100 to 300mm. Since it's no longer in production, you can find it pretty cheap in the used market. Nikon doesn't offer a Z-mount version, so if you want a Nikon lens with these specs at this price, the used market is your best bet. I've had this lens for a few years and I've really enjoyed using it, even though it's a bit of a legacy from my DSLR days. mentioned earlier, this review is also available in written format on our blog, where you will find detailed test charts on sharpness and other characteristics. I've also listed a few alternatives at the end of the article for those interested. Most of the sample images are available in high resolution on a separate site, and you'll find links to both the blog post and sample images in the description below. If you are thinking about buying this lens, you can support our work by using the links in the description. It won't cost you anything extra or affect the price, but it helps us a little. You can also donate to support the channel. A huge thanks for watching. Your comments are always welcome. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Until the next video, have a fantastic time, everyone.